They pushed her face down against the cold supermarket floor. The cuffs bit into her wrists as the officer pressed his knee into her back, ignoring the sharp cry of pain that escaped her lips. Shoppers froze mid-step. Someone gasped. Someone else quietly lifted their phone to record. And then the officer said it, low enough that only she could hear it, but loud enough to destroy something inside her forever. People like you don't belong here. Evelyn Carter was 61 years old. She had arthritis in her hands, a heart full of memories, and 40 years of quiet, honest work behind her. In that moment, none of it mattered. To them, she wasn't a grandmother. She wasn't a citizen. She wasn't even a person. She was just a problem on the floor. But what no one in that store knew, what no one could have imagined, was that this humiliation would not be the end of Evelyn's story. Because only minutes later, a stranger would walk through those automatic doors, barefoot, dressed in white, with a deep red cloth draped across his shoulder. And when he did, everything would change. Before we begin, take a moment and stay with us until the end of this story. And if stories of faith, justice, and unexpected miracles move your heart, consider subscribing to Heaven Walks With Us. Because sometimes, the story you need most arrives exactly when you feel most alone. Evelyn Carter lay motionless on the linoleum floor, her cheek pressed against the cold surface as fluorescent lights buzzed above her like distant insects. The pressure on her back made it hard to breathe. Her wrists throbbed where the handcuffs cut into her skin. Too tight, unforgiving, biting into joints already swollen from years of arthritis. She tried to shift her hands, just slightly, but the officer's grip tightened in response. "Don't move," he snapped. "Sanan." The pain shot through her shoulders and down her spine, sharp and electric. Evelyn clenched her teeth to keep from screaming. She had learned long ago that pain, when acknowledged, often invited more of it. Around her, the supermarket had gone strangely quiet. Carts stood abandoned in the aisles. A carton of eggs lay cracked near the produce section, yolk slowly spreading across the tile. Somewhere near the registers, a child began to cry, confused by the tension thick in the air. Evelyn could feel the eyes on her. Some stared openly, curiosity mixed with judgment. Some looked away, pretending to study shelves they had passed 100 times before. And some, she knew without seeing, were recording. Her mind struggled to make sense of what was happening. Just minutes earlier, she had been walking these same aisles like she had every week for more than a decade, comparing prices, checking labels, doing the careful math that came with living on a tight budget. Now she was on the floor, treated like a criminal, treated like something disposable. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't take anything." The words felt small, fragile, powerless. The officer didn't respond. Instead, he shifted his weight again, his knee pressing harder into her back, reminding her exactly how little control she had left. Evelyn closed her eyes. She thought of her granddaughter, Lily, probably still waiting at school, glancing at the clock, wondering why Grandma hadn't arrived yet. She thought of the birthday cake she had planned to bake that evening, the groceries sitting untouched in her cart, and beneath the fear, beneath the pain, beneath the humiliation, another feeling rose quietly in her chest. Not anger, not hatred, but a deep, aching sadness. Because in that moment, lying on the floor of a store she trusted, Evelyn Carter realized something devastating. For the first time in her life, she felt completely invisible. Evelyn Carter had not always been invisible. There was a time when people noticed her easily, when her laugh filled small rooms, when her hands were steady and strong, when her life felt anchored to something solid and predictable. She was born in a quiet Midwestern town, the kind of place where neighbors waved from porches and everyone knew which car belonged to which family. Her parents were factory workers, honest, tired, proud in the way people were when they paid their bills on time and taught their children to do the same. Evelyn learned early that dignity was not something you demanded. It was something you carried. She married young, to a man named Robert, a licensed electrician who smelled of sawdust and sun when he came home from work. They moved west when the jobs dried up back home, chasing opportunity the way millions of Americans had done before them. Arizona promised work, warmth, and a future that felt just within reach. For a while, it delivered. They raised one daughter, Madison, in a small rented house with creaky floors and a backyard that never quite grew grass. Money was always tight, but the fridge was rarely empty. Sundays meant church in the morning and grocery shopping in the afternoon. Evelyn clipped coupons. Robert fixed things himself. They made it work. Then, one August afternoon, everything cracked. Robert collapsed at a job site during a brutal heat wave. By the time Evelyn reached the hospital, he was already gone, his heart giving out under years of physical labor and relentless sun. No warning, no goodbye, just silence. At 54, Evelyn became a widow. She didn't fall apart the way people expected her to. There were no dramatic breakdowns, no public displays of grief. She cried alone, late at night, sitting at the kitchen table long after the house had gone quiet. Then, every morning, she got up and went to work. Because that was what you did. She cleaned houses. She helped elderly clients bathe, dress, eat. She scrubbed floors and changed sheets and listened to stories that repeated themselves day after day. The work was hard on her body. Her joints ached. Her hands stiffened. Her shoulders burned with a constant, dull pain. But she never complained. Madison grew up, went to nursing school, married, had a daughter of her own. Evelyn helped when she could, babysitting, cooking, filling in the gaps when life became overwhelming. Her granddaughter, Lily, changed everything. Lily's laughter pulled Evelyn back into the world when grief threatened to shrink it. The child's questions about butterflies, planets, and why the moon followed the car at night made Evelyn feel useful again. Seen, loved. Faith became quieter for Evelyn after Robert's death, but it never disappeared. She still prayed at night, still believed that goodness mattered, still trusted that kindness, even when unnoticed, counted for something. She was not rich. She was not powerful. She was not important in any way the world measured. But Evelyn Carter had lived her life with integrity. And now, lying on the floor of a supermarket, handcuffed and humiliated, everything she had been, everything she still was being erased in the eyes of strangers who had never bothered to look. Lily Carter was 8 years old and believed the world was still mostly good. She believed butterflies knew where they were going, even when they traveled thousands of miles. She believed stars were ancient and patient. She believed her grandmother could fix almost anything, with the right words, the right food, or simply by listening long enough. Most of all, she believed that Grandma Evelyn would always come. Every weekday afternoon, Lily watched the clock in her classroom with quiet certainty. When the long hand reached the bottom and the short hand hovered near 4, she packed her backpack without being told. She didn't worry. She didn't rush. She knew Evelyn would be waiting outside the school gates, standing a little to the side, waving with one hand and holding a worn canvas toad in the other. That trust was sacred to Evelyn. After Robert died, Lily became the thread that stitched Evelyn back into the rhythm of life. The house no longer felt unbearably silent when Lily's shoes kicked off near the door. The kitchen felt alive again when small hands helped stir batter or sprinkle cheese where it didn't quite belong. Lily didn't see the arthritis. She didn't notice the pain in Evelyn's shoulders. She didn't know how much effort it took some mornings just to stand up straight. To Lily, her grandmother was simply steady, unshakable. That Saturday would be Lily's 9th birthday. Not a big party, just family, a few balloons, and Lily's favorite dinner. Evelyn had been planning it quietly for weeks, writing lists on scrap paper, counting tip money from extra hours she picked up helping a neighbor's mother. She wanted it to feel special. There would be roasted chicken with crispy skin, macaroni baked just right, not too dry, not too soft, and a strawberry shortcake with real whipped cream. Lily had asked for it herself, explaining very seriously that boxed frosting tasted too fake. Evelyn smiled when she thought about that. That morning, Lily had hugged her extra tight before school. "Don't forget," Lily said, eyes bright. "You promised." "I won't forget," Evelyn replied, kissing the top of her head. "I never forget." That promise echoed now, painfully, as Evelyn lay on the supermarket floor. She wondered if Lily was already waiting, if she was staring at the empty space where her grandmother always stood, if doubt, small but sharp, had begun to creep into her chest. The thought hurt more than the cuffs. Evelyn didn't fear jail the way people imagined. She feared being late. She feared breaking the quiet trust of a child who still believed adults kept their word. As her cheek pressed against the cold floor, Evelyn closed her eyes and held on to one thought with everything she had left. Please let me get to her. Because if she could just stand again, if she could just walk out of this store, she could face anything else. And she had no idea how close that prayer was to being answered. The grocery store on East Main Street had once felt like an extension of Evelyn's home. She remembered when it first opened, bright, clean, and proudly advertised as a place built for families. Over the years, the shelves changed, the prices crept up, and the checkout lanes shifted to make room for self-service machines, but the rhythm stayed familiar. Evelyn came every week. She knew which aisle stocked the cheapest store brand staples. She knew which freezer door stuck if you pulled it too hard. She knew the exact spot near the bakery where the air always smelled faintly of sugar and bread. And most importantly, the people knew her. Tara, the cashier with graying hair and tired eyes, always smiled when Evelyn stepped into her lane. They talked about weather, aches, and grandchildren. Nothing dramatic, just the quiet acknowledgement that comes from seeing the same face again and again over many years. The previous manager had been the same way. Mr. Harris, mid-50s, soft-spoken, always wearing a tie that looked slightly too tight. He greeted Evelyn by name, asked after Lily, and once held the door open for her when her hands were full. He understood that loyalty mattered, even when margins were thin. But Mr. Harris retired at the end of summer. The new manager arrived without ceremony. His name was Logan Pierce, and he came with a tablet, a checklist, and a mandate from corporate headquarters. Loss prevention, shrink reduction, efficiency metrics, words printed in bold on laminated sheets during training seminars. To Logan, this store wasn't familiar. It wasn't personal. It was a problem that needed fixing. He had been there barely 3 weeks. Long enough to notice that theft reports had been climbing. Long enough to feel the pressure of proving himself. Long enough to believe that being strict meant being effective. That afternoon, when Evelyn walked through the automatic doors at 3:07 p.m., she didn't see a man fighting insecurity behind a manager's badge. She saw a store she trusted. She took a cart. She adjusted the strap of her canvas tote. She paused, as she always did, just past the entrance, mentally organizing her list so she wouldn't forget anything important. She had no idea she was already being watched. From the small office above the floor, Logan glanced at the security monitor. His eyes skimmed past teenagers, busy parents, and delivery workers until they settled on Evelyn, an older woman, large tote bag, moving slowly. Logan leaned forward, not because he knew anything for certain, but because he thought he did. And in that moment, the meaning of everything Evelyn had trusted about that store quietly began to shift, without her ever realizing it. Evelyn moved through the store the way she always did, slowly, deliberately, with quiet attention. She started in produce, lifting avocados gently in her palm, pressing just enough to test their ripeness. Too hard, too soft. She set them back carefully, choosing only what she knew she would use. Waste was a luxury she had never been able to afford. Next came dairy. Butter prices had jumped again. Evelyn frowned slightly, comparing labels, doing the math in her head. She picked up one brand, checked the price, then returned it to the shelf. Picked up another, lower, but still more than last month. She sighed and placed it back, finally choosing the least expensive option. Nothing unusual, nothing illegal, but from the camera feed above, the pattern looked different. Pick up, put back, pick up again. To Logan Pierce, fresh from corporate training, the behavior matched a bullet point he had memorized only days earlier. Indecisive handling of merchandise, possible concealment attempt. Evelyn pushed her cart toward the center aisles, where shelves were packed tight with canned goods and boxed staples. This was where she spent the most time, reading labels, checking sizes, comparing ounces per dollar. She reached into her canvas tote and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Her grocery list, written in careful block letters. She smoothed it against the cart handle and scanned it, lips moving silently as she checked items off in her head. Logan's jaw tightened. From his angle, all he saw was a hand disappearing into a bag. He didn't notice that the bag was empty except for the list, a pair of reading glasses, and an old wallet. He didn't notice the way Evelyn returned each item neatly to its place. He didn't notice the patience in her movements. He saw what he expected to see. Evelyn paused in the baking aisle, holding 2 boxes of pasta. One was on sale, but smaller. The other cost more, but would last longer. She hesitated, weighing value against price, another calculation she had made 1,000 times in her life. Finally, she chose the cheaper box and placed it in her cart. Above her, Logan exhaled sharply through his nose. The tote bag rested against Evelyn's hip, unchanged, flat as ever. But in Logan's mind, a story had already taken shape. One where an older woman exploited leniency. One where lost numbers climbed because no one had the courage to act. He didn't check the camera zoom. He didn't ask Tara if she recognized the customer. He didn't walk the floor to observe more closely. He radioed security instead. Evelyn turned toward the checkout lanes, her cart nearly full now. She felt a familiar sense of relief. She was on schedule. If she moved quickly, she could still make it to Lily's school on time. She never saw the manager step out from behind the office door. She never heard the decision being made, and she had no idea that the small, ordinary actions of a careful grandmother had just been transformed inside someone else's mind into proof of a crime she never committed. Logan Pierce had been given 3 weeks. 3 weeks to show improvement. 3 weeks to prove he could tighten operations. 3 weeks to convince people higher up the ladder that hiring him had not been a mistake. He told himself he didn't care what they thought, that he was beyond needing approval. But the truth pressed in on him every time he opened the dashboard on his tablet and saw the red numbers blinking back. Shrink was up, margins were down, and corporate wanted answers. Logan hadn't always imagined himself managing a grocery store. He'd studied business at a state university, graduated with decent grades, and pictured something cleaner, an office, a title, a sense of control. Instead, he'd bounced between jobs, each ending the same way. A disagreement with a supervisor, a comment taken the wrong way, a quiet dismissal wrapped in polite HR language. This job felt like a reset, a chance to be taken seriously. During onboarding, the loss prevention seminar had stuck with him more than anything else. The presenter spoke with certainty, confidence, like someone who had cracked a code others were too timid to use. Patterns matter, the presenter said. Trust your instincts. If you hesitate, you've already lost. Logan took notes. He underlined phrases. He told himself decisiveness was strength. So when he saw Evelyn on the monitor, slow, methodical, carrying a tote, something inside him snapped neatly into place. Not evidence, not fact, just recognition, or what he believed was recognition. This is it, he thought. This is how it starts. He zoomed the camera slightly, watching her compare items again. He noticed the way she lingered in aisles far from the registers. He ignored everything that contradicted his growing certainty. He did not consider her age. He did not consider her routine. He did not consider the possibility that he was wrong, because being wrong carried a cost he wasn't willing to pay. Logan imagined the report he would file, the meeting where he would present clean numbers, the nods of approval, the quiet respect he had always felt denied. When Evelyn reached into her bag again, only to unfold her list, Logan felt a rush of something dangerously close to triumph. He pressed the radio button. Possible shoplifting in progress, he said, keeping his voice steady. Older female, canvas bag, aisle 12. As the words left his mouth, a thin thread of doubt tugged at him. A voice, a small but persistent, suggested he double-check the footage. Ask a cashier. Wait. Logan silenced it. Waiting had never worked for him before. He straightened his badge, squared his shoulders, and stepped out of the office. In his mind, the narrative was already complete. All that remained was execution. On the floor below, Evelyn Carter pushed her cart toward the front of the store, unaware that someone else had just decided who she was. And once that decision had been made, nothing she said or did would matter anymore. Evelyn was only a few steps from the checkout lanes when she felt a hand clamp down on her arm. The grip was firm, sudden, enough to make her flinch. "Ma'am, you need to come with me," a man said behind her. She turned, startled, and saw a badge clipped to his belt. The word manager stood out more than his name. Logan Pierce. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp, already convinced of something Evelyn didn't yet understand. "I'm sorry?" she said. "Is there a problem?" Logan didn't answer the question. Instead, he guided her, too forcefully, toward the front of the store, stopping just short of the automatic doors where customers entered and exited in a steady stream. The worst possible place. People slowed as they passed. Some stared. Some whispered. A few openly paused, curiosity flickering across their faces, as if this were an unexpected form of entertainment. "What's going on?" Evelyn asked again, her voice trembling now despite her effort to keep it calm. "I'm about to check out." Logan folded his arms. "We've been monitoring you," he said. "We believe you've been concealing merchandise." The words landed like a slap. "What?" Evelyn shook her head in disbelief. No, that's not true. I was comparing prices. Everything I'm buying is right there in the cart. You can see it." Logan didn't look at the cart. He looked past her, at the watching crowd. "We're calling the police," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "Until they arrive, you'll stay right here." Evelyn felt heat rush to her face. "This is a mistake," she said quickly. "Please, ask the cashier, Tara, at Register 4. She knows me. I've been shopping here for years." Her eyes searched the checkout lanes desperately. Tara stood frozen behind her register, hands gripping the counter. Their eyes met for a brief moment, long enough for Evelyn to see recognition, and something else. Fear. Tara looked away. The crowd thickened. A man in a business suit shook his head as he passed. A woman pulling an organic-filled cart slowed to stare, her lips pursed in judgment. Someone lifted a phone and angled it carefully, pretending not to record while recording anyway. Evelyn's chest tightened. She felt exposed, stripped of context, reduced to a single accusation. "I have the money," she said, her voice breaking. "I can pay right now. I just need to get to my granddaughter's school." Logan checked his watch. "That's not my concern," he replied. And just like that, Evelyn Carter, who had never been arrested, never accused of anything more serious than parking too close to a fire lane, was turned into a public warning. She stood there, clutching the handle of her cart, surrounded by strangers who had already decided what kind of person she was. The doors slid open and closed behind her, again and again. Each time, she felt a little smaller, and somewhere outside, sirens began to approach, growing louder with every passing second. The sirens grew louder until they cut cleanly through the low murmur of the store. A patrol car pulled up outside the entrance, lights flashing red and blue across the glass doors. Conversations died mid-sentence. Someone whispered, "It's serious," as if that hadn't already been obvious. Officer Daniel Crow stepped inside with the confidence of a man who expected obedience before he ever spoke. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform crisp and heavy with authority. His hand rested casually near his belt as his eyes swept the scene. Evelyn standing stiffly beside her cart, Logan waiting with arms crossed, the small crowd lingering just close enough to watch without being involved. "What's the situation?" Crow asked. Logan straightened. "Suspected shoplifting," he said. "I observed her concealing items and acting suspiciously." Crow's gaze moved to Evelyn. It lingered there. "Ma'am," he said, his tone clipped. "Is that true?" Evelyn swallowed. "No, sir. I didn't take anything. I was comparing prices. Everything I plan to buy is in my cart. Crow stepped closer, invading her space in a way that made her instinctively lean back. Do you have any identification? He asked. Yes, Evelyn replied quickly, fumbling in her tote. Her hands shook as she pulled out her wallet and handed over her driver's license. I've been shopping here for years. Please, if you just check the cameras, you'll see. Crow examined the license longer than necessary, his expression unreadable. You live nearby? He asked. Yes. You employed? Yes. I work as a home aide. He handed the license back abruptly. Then you should know better. Evelyn felt something crack inside her chest. I do know better, she said softly. That's why I'm asking you to look at the footage. Crow turned to Logan. You got video? Logan hesitated, just a fraction of a second too long. The cameras covering that aisle are currently down, he said. Maintenance issue. Evelyn looked between them, hope flickering. Then check my bag, she offered. Check my cart. I have nothing to hide. Crow didn't move. Instead, he folded his arms. People always say that, he replied. Everyone's innocent once we show up. His words drew a few nods from the crowd. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Sir, I need to pick up my granddaughter. She's 8 years old. She's waiting for me. Crow glanced at his watch. That's unfortunate, he said. But right now, we're dealing with a theft investigation. The word theft echoed, heavy and final. Crow gestured toward the entrance. You're going to come with me. Evelyn's heart began to pound. Please, she said, her voice barely steady now. This is a misunderstanding. Crow reached for her arm. And in that moment, before the cuffs, before the floor, before everything fell apart, Evelyn understood something with terrifying clarity. No one here was looking for the truth. They were looking for control. Crow's hand closed around Evelyn's arm with practiced certainty. It wasn't violent, not yet, but it was firm enough to tell her that resistance would only make things worse. He guided her toward a bench near the entrance, positioning her where everyone could see. A message without words. Evelyn's heart raced. Officer, please, she said. If the cameras in that aisle aren't working, there are others. This store is full of them. Someone must have seen me. Crow didn't answer. Logan stood a few feet away, arms folded, eyes fixed on the floor tiles as if studying their pattern. He looked uncomfortable, but not enough to speak. I didn't hide anything, Evelyn continued. I was reading labels. I always do. Prices keep going up, and I have to be careful. That's all. Crow sighed, slow and deliberate, as though her words were an inconvenience. Ma'am, we've already heard this story. It's not a story, she said, her voice breaking despite her effort to control it. It's the truth. She looked around desperately, searching for a face that might soften. Someone willing to say, I saw her. She didn't do anything. No one did. The store hummed with a low, uncomfortable energy. The automatic doors slid open and shut behind them. Somewhere, a register beeped. Life continued, indifferent. Crow turned back to Logan. You're sure the footage is unavailable? Yes, Logan replied quickly. Maintenance confirmed it earlier this week. The lie sat heavy in the air. Evelyn felt it, even if she couldn't prove it. The way Logan wouldn't meet her eyes. The way he spoke too smoothly, too confidently. If there's no video, Crow said, then this comes down to testimony. He looked at Evelyn again. And right now, your story doesn't outweigh a store manager's report. The words struck deeper than the accusation itself. Evelyn's shoulders sagged. 40 years of showing up on time, of working without complaint, of doing everything right, and none of it counted. Her vision blurred as tears filled her eyes, not from pain, but from the sudden, crushing sense of helplessness. She thought of Lily again, of her small backpack hanging by the classroom door, of the way she trusted, without question, that Grandma would be there. Evelyn closed her eyes, not because she was giving up, but because she had nowhere else to turn. God, she prayed silently, the words barely forming. I don't understand this, but please don't let me face it alone. When she opened her eyes again, nothing had changed. The officer was still there. The manager was still silent. The crowd was still watching. And yet, deep inside her chest, something quiet and steady began to stir. A fragile hope. She didn't know it yet, but the worst part was still ahead. And so was the moment that would change everything. The decision was made without ceremony. Crow didn't announce it. He didn't warn her. He simply stepped behind Evelyn and took her arm, twisting it back in one swift, practiced motion. Pain exploded through her shoulder. Evelyn gasped, a sharp, involuntary sound torn from her chest. "Please wait," she cried. "I have arthritis. You're hurting me." Crow didn't slow. "Hands behind your back," he ordered. "I'm trying," she said, panic flooding her voice. Her left arm refused to move the way it used to. Years of strain and age betrayed her in the worst possible moment. Crow interpreted the hesitation as resistance. He pushed harder. Something in Evelyn's shoulder popped, an ugly, wet sound that made her stomach turn. She screamed this time, the pain ripping through her like fire. The crowd recoiled, a ripple of shocked movement passing through the onlookers. Then came the cuffs. Metal closed around her wrist with a final, merciless click. Too tight. Immediately too tight. The pressure crushed against swollen joints, sending numbness shooting into her fingers. "I can't feel my hands," Evelyn sobbed. "Please, they're too tight." Crow ignored her. He placed a heavy hand on the back of her neck and forced her downward. The floor rushed up to meet her face as her knees hit first, then her cheek, the cold linoleum stealing her breath. "Stay still," he growled, his mouth close to her ear. "Or this gets worse." The world tilted. Evelyn lay there, trembling, her face pressed against the floor, where thousands of shoes had passed that day. Tears streamed from her eyes, pooling beneath her cheek. Her body shook, not just from pain, but from the shock of being reduced to this. Around her, the crowd reacted in fragments. A man stepped back, muttering that he didn't want trouble. A woman whispered to her friend that there must be more to the story. Someone crouched slightly to get a better angle with their phone. A teenager began recording openly now, holding the device steady, his expression detached, as if this were content, not a human being. Tara stood behind her register, hands pressed over her mouth. Tears ran freely down her face. She knew Evelyn. She knew this was wrong, and yet her feet felt glued to the floor. Fear wrapped around her like a vice. Evelyn's sobs grew quieter, weaker. She stopped pleading. The words had exhausted themselves, worn thin by indifference. In her mind, images blurred together. Lily's smile, Robert's laugh, the warmth of her kitchen in the evening light. All of it felt very far away. Crow leaned closer, his voice dropping low enough that only she could hear. "You people come here thinking you can take whatever you want," he said. "But not today." Evelyn squeezed her eyes shut. The pain was unbearable, the humiliation worse. And just when it seemed she could sink no lower, just when the weight of the moment threatened to crush her completely, the automatic doors at the front of the store slid open, and something changed. The automatic doors opened with their familiar mechanical sigh. At first, no one paid attention. Customers came and went all day long. The sound blended into the background noise of beeping scanners and low conversation. But then, people began to notice. The man who stepped inside wasn't wearing shoes. Bare feet touched the polished floor without a sound. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if the chaos unfolding a few yards away did not rush him, as if time itself had loosened its grip around him. He wore a simple white garment, plain, unadorned, and over his shoulder rested a deep red cloth that fell naturally down his back. It wasn't a costume. It didn't look theatrical. If anything, it looked timeless. Someone near the entrance frowned, confused. Another person tilted their head, trying to place where they had seen a man like this before. The stranger walked forward. As he passed, something subtle happened. Conversations died mid-sentence. The hum of the store seemed to soften, as if the air itself were listening. People stepped aside without realizing why, creating a narrow path through the aisles. Not out of fear, out of something closer to reverence. A small girl sitting in the child seat of a shopping cart stopped crying abruptly. She stared at the man with wide eyes, then tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom," she whispered, awe threading her voice. "That man looks like light." Her mother glanced down, ready to hush her, then looked up. A chill ran through her. The stranger's eyes were calm, not curious, not startled by the scene of a woman on the floor and a police officer looming above her. Calm in a way that felt impossibly out of place. He kept walking. Crow was too focused on asserting control to notice him. His hand remained pressed against Evelyn's neck, his attention locked on the crowd, the phones, the authority he was determined to maintain. Logan Pierce did see him. The manager's eyes flicked toward the aisle and widened. A flicker of alarm crossed his face, followed by confusion. He took an involuntary step back, his stomach tightening for reasons he couldn't explain. The stranger stopped several feet away from the scene, close enough now that his presence could no longer be ignored. A hush fell over the store, heavy, expectant, like the moment before a storm breaks. Evelyn, still face down on the floor, felt it too. She didn't know how. She didn't see him yet, but something shifted inside her chest, easing the tightness just enough for her to breathe again. The stranger took one more step forward, and for the first time since the cuffs closed around her wrists, Evelyn Carter did not feel alone. Logan Pierce felt it before he understood it. A pressure, quiet but overwhelming, settled in his chest, as if the air around him had thickened. He turned fully toward the stranger now, his mouth opening to speak out of instinct, to reassert control, to remind everyone who was in charge. The words never came. The man in white looked at him. It wasn't a long look. It wasn't dramatic. No accusation was spoken, no gesture made. But in that single moment of eye contact, something inside Logan collapsed. It was as if the stranger could see past the badge, past the tablet in his hand, past the carefully constructed image of competence Logan had spent years trying to build. He saw the truth. Logan's breath caught in his throat. Images rushed through his mind, faster than thought, sharper than memory. The argument that got him fired from his last job, the lies he told himself about being misunderstood, the quiet resentment he carried toward anyone who made him feel small, the choice he had just made, minutes ago, to accuse an innocent woman rather than risk looking weak. He suddenly understood exactly what he had done. Not in theory, not as a mistake, but as harm, real harm, inflicted on a real person, for no reason other than his own fear. His knees felt weak. Logan took a step back, then another, his hand gripping the edge of a shelf to steady himself. A cold sweat broke across his forehead. The store lights seemed too bright, too exposed. This isn't happening, he thought desperately. But it was. The stranger's eyes held no anger, no satisfaction, only a clarity so absolute it left Logan nowhere to hide. Every justification he had rehearsed, policy, training, procedure, crumbled. He saw himself clearly now, not as a decisive manager protecting assets, but as a frightened man who had chosen power over truth. Logan's gaze dropped to Evelyn on the floor. For the first time since spotting her on the security monitor, he didn't see a suspect. He saw a grandmother. He saw pain. He saw dignity being crushed. And he saw his own fingerprints all over it. His chest tightened painfully. He whispered, though no one was asking him anything. The stranger looked away then, as if Logan no longer required his attention. That, somehow, felt worse. Logan remained frozen, trembling, his mind reeling. He knew, without anyone saying a word, that whatever happened next, there was no going back to who he had been an hour ago. Something irreversible had begun, and the truth, once seen, could not be unseen. Officer Daniel Crow finally noticed the silence. It wasn't the normal quiet that followed authority, the kind that came from fear or compliance. This was different, heavy, pressurized, as if the air itself had turned dense around him. He lifted his head, irritation flashing across his face. "Hey," he snapped. You, step back. The man in white did not move. Crow straightened fully now, squaring his shoulders, shifting his weight the way officers did when preparing to escalate. This is an active arrest, he said loudly. Interfering is a crime. You need to leave. Now. The stranger's eyes met his, and for the first time in years, Daniel Crow felt something he did not recognize immediately. Fear, not fear of consequences, not fear of losing control, but the raw, childlike fear of being seen. Daniel Thomas Crow, the man said calmly. The name landed like a physical blow. Crow's breath stuttered. No one here should know his full name. Not spoken like that. Not with that certainty. The man continued, his voice steady, neither raised nor harsh. Born March 14th, Tulsa, Oklahoma, son of Richard Crow and Ann Miller, baptized at Trinity Methodist before you stopped believing any of it mattered. Crow staggered back a step. How do you know that? He demanded, though the authority had already drained from his voice. The man did not answer the question. August 21st, he went on. 3 years ago, you took cash from a man you pulled over on Road 87, told yourself it was a one-time thing, that no one would get hurt. Crow's face drained of color. You don't know what you're talking about, Juan, he said, but the words were hollow. October 9th, the man continued, relentless but not cruel. You slammed a 17-year-old boy against a squad car hard enough to fracture his orbital bone. You wrote resisting arrest in your report. You knew it was a lie the moment you typed it. The store felt frozen in time. Phones lowered. Mouths hung open. Even the buzzing lights overhead seemed to fade. Crow's knees buckled. He dropped to one knee, then both, the sound echoing sharply against the floor. His hands trembled, hovering uselessly at his sides. I didn't mean to, he whispered, tears spilling freely now. I was angry. I was tired. I didn't think. You did think, the man said gently. You chose. Crow bowed his head, shoulders shaking. Years of buried guilt surged to the surface. Faces he'd avoided remembering. Reports he'd falsified. Lines he'd crossed because no one stopped him. Who are you? He asked, his voice breaking completely. What are you? The man's expression softened, not with approval, but with sorrow layered over patience. I am the one who saw every choice, he said quietly, and every moment you could have chosen differently. Crow sobbed openly now, the uniform that once symbolized power hanging on him like a costume stripped of meaning. I've ruined lives, he choked. I don't know how to fix this. The man looked past him, toward Evelyn, still on the floor, still trembling. Start, he said, by letting her go. And in that moment, Daniel Crow understood with terrifying clarity that his authority had never truly belonged to him. It had only been borrowed, and now it was gone. The words were not shouted. They weren't delivered with anger or threat. They were spoken softly, almost gently. Release her. Yet they carried a weight that pressed down on the entire store. Officer Crow lifted his head slowly. His eyes were red, unfocused, stripped of the hardness that had defined him only minutes before. He looked at the man in white, then at Evelyn on the floor, and something inside him finally broke all the way open. His hands trembled as he reached for the key. The small metal tool slipped from his fingers once, clattering against the linoleum. The sound echoed loudly in the silence, drawing a sharp inhale from the crowd. Crow swallowed hard, picked it up again, and tried to steady his shaking hands. I'm sorry, he whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was saying it to. He knelt beside Evelyn, his movements awkward now, uncertain. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the cruelty. What remained was a man stripped bare by truth. The key slid into the cuff. With a soft click, the first restraint opened. Evelyn gasped as blood rushed back into her wrist, a sharp, burning sensation spreading through her fingers. Crow hesitated for a fraction of a second, then unlocked the second cuff. The metal fell away. Evelyn lay still, stunned, her arms limp at her sides. She expected the pain to surge, to feel the full weight of what had been done to her crash down all at once. But something else happened instead. Warmth. It began where the cuffs had been, spreading outward in gentle waves. The deep red marks that had circled her wrists, angry, swollen, undeniable, began to fade. Before anyone could speak, before anyone could rationalize it, the bruising softened, the swelling receded, the skin returned to its normal color, unbroken and whole. A collective gasp rippled through the store. Evelyn lifted her hands slowly, turning them over in front of her eyes. She flexed her fingers. No sharp pain, no stiffness, no numbness. Her shoulder, moments ago screaming in agony, felt suddenly light, strong. She pushed gently against the floor, testing herself, and she rose. Not hurried, not assisted, but steady. The man in white extended his hand toward her, his eyes kind, unwavering. "Stand up," he said softly. "You were never meant to stay down there." Evelyn took his hand. As she did, a warmth flooded her entire body, deep, healing, undeniable. Tears streamed down her face, but they were no longer born of fear or humiliation. They were tears of awe. Around them, no one moved. No one spoke. Because everyone in that store understood, in that moment, that they had just witnessed something that could not be explained away. Something holy had stepped into an ordinary place, and nothing would ever feel ordinary again. Evelyn stood there, trembling, not from pain, but from disbelief. She slowly lifted her hands again, turning them beneath the fluorescent lights as if the answer might suddenly change if she looked long enough. The skin around her wrist was smooth, unbroken. The deep red impressions left by the cuffs were gone entirely, as though they had never existed. A murmur spread through the crowd. "That's not possible. I swear there were marks." "Did you see that?" Evelyn barely heard them. Her attention drifted inward, toward her body, toward the places that had carried pain for years. She rolled her shoulders gently, expecting the familiar sharp protest in her joints. It never came. The ache that had lived there, constant, dull, exhausting, was gone. Her knees, which had screamed when they struck the floor moments earlier, felt steady beneath her weight, strong, reliable. She took a tentative step forward, then another. Each movement felt easier than the last, as if something heavy had been lifted from inside her, not just from her bones, but from places far deeper. Evelyn let out a quiet, broken sob, not of fear, not of grief, of recognition. She looked up at the man who still held her hand. His grip was gentle, grounding. When she met his eyes, she saw no triumph there, no spectacle, only compassion. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of everything she couldn't say. "Thank you for seeing me." He smiled softly. "I have always seen you," he replied. The words settled into her chest like warmth from a fire on a cold night. Evelyn felt them reach into memories she had carried silently for decades. The nights she cried alone after Robert died. The mornings she forced herself out of bed despite the pain. The moments she wondered if her life had mattered at all. The answer was clear now. Around them, the crowd remained frozen, caught between wonder and shame. Phones slipped from hands. Heads bowed. Eyes filled with tears that had nothing to do with Evelyn's suffering and everything to do with their own. Officer Crow remained kneeling a short distance away, his face buried in his hands. His body shook with quiet sobs, his uniform suddenly looking too large, too empty. Whatever power he had worn like armor had fallen away, leaving only a man confronted by the truth of himself. Logan Pierce stood rigid, pale, his mouth slightly open as if he were still trying to form words that would never be enough. Evelyn turned slowly, taking in the faces around her. She saw fear. She saw regret. She saw people realizing, perhaps for the first time, the cost of silence. The man in white released her hand and took a small step forward, his presence commanding attention without effort. "You witnessed an injustice today," he said, his voice calm but resonant. "And most of you chose comfort over courage." His gaze moved gently across the crowd, not accusing, but unflinching. "Yet even now, healing is possible." Evelyn stood beside him, whole in a way she had not felt in years. Not because her body had been restored, though it had, but because something even more profound had occurred. Her dignity had been returned. And in that sacred, ordinary space, surrounded by shelves and checkout lanes, healing had taken root, not just in one woman, but in every heart willing to feel it. The man in white turned slowly, letting his gaze move across the faces gathered around them. No one could hold it for long. Some looked down at the floor. Others wiped at their eyes, suddenly aware of tears they hadn't planned to shed. A few stood rigid, arms crossed, struggling against something uncomfortable stirring inside them. "You saw what was happening," he said quietly. "You knew it was wrong." The words were not sharp. They didn't need to be. "They pushed her down," he continued. "They hurt her. They humiliated her. And still, most of you chose silence." A woman near the bakery pressed her hand to her mouth. Haha. A man who had been recording lowered his phone, his screen going dark. The teenager who had filmed openly now stared at the floor, his ears burning. "Not because you are evil," the man said, "but because you were afraid." The store felt smaller somehow, more intimate, as if the walls themselves had leaned in to listen. Afraid of causing trouble, afraid of losing comfort, afraid of becoming the next one on the floor. He paused, then added, "Fear explains silence. It does not excuse it." A sob broke through the hush. Tara stepped out from behind her register. Her hands shook visibly as she walked toward Evelyn, weaving through the crowd that parted instinctively to let her pass. Tears streamed down her face, soaking into the collar of her uniform. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. I knew you didn't steal anything. I've known you for years." And I didn't say a word. She stopped in front of Evelyn and, to the shock of everyone watching, sank to her knees. "I was scared," Tara whispered. "Scared of losing my job. Scared of the police. Scared of everything except doing what was right." Evelyn looked down at her, heart aching. For a moment, the store held its breath. Then Evelyn reached out and took Tara's hands, gently pulling her back to her feet. "I understand," Evelyn said softly. "I've been afraid too." Tara broke down completely, burying her face against Evelyn's shoulder. Evelyn held her, truly held her, feeling no anger rise within her, only a deep, aching compassion. Around them, something shifted. The woman in yoga clothes wiped her eyes, shame replacing the earlier disdain on her face. The man in the business suit swallowed hard, his posture no longer confident but small. One by one, people felt the weight of the choice they had made and the cost of it. The man in white watched quietly. This was what he had come for. Not punishment, not spectacle, but the moment when hearts, long closed for safety, finally opened to truth. And once opened, they could never close the same way again. Logan Pierce stood apart from the crowd, his back against a shelf of boxed pasta, staring at the floor as if it might swallow him whole. The store no longer felt familiar. The numbers, the metrics, the rules he had clung to so tightly had dissolved into something small and irrelevant. All that remained was the image of Evelyn on the floor and the knowledge that he had put her there. His legs moved before his pride could stop them. Logan stepped forward, each stride heavy, uncertain. The crowd parted silently as he approached, eyes following him with a mix of curiosity and judgment. He stopped a few feet in front of Evelyn, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I was wrong," he said, his voice barely audible at first. He swallowed and tried again. "I accused you without proof. I lied about the cameras. I let them hurt you." His voice cracked. "I did it because I was scared. Scared of failing, scared of looking weak, and I took it out on you." His knees buckled. Logan dropped to the floor in front of her, the sound of his impact echoing softly through the store. He didn't try to soften the fall. He didn't look up. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he whispered. "I know that, but I need you to know that I see what I did now. Truly see it." Evelyn felt a familiar tug inside her chest, an old, instinctive reaction. A part of her wanted to step back, to protect herself, to let him sit in the weight of his guilt. No one would have blamed her. She had been humiliated. She had been hurt. She had been erased. But another part of her, the part shaped by years of quiet faith, by loss, by endurance, spoke louder. Evelyn stepped forward. She placed a hand on Logan's shoulder. He flinched at the touch, then stilled. "I forgive you," she said clearly. The words rippled outward, felt even by those who hadn't heard them directly. Logan looked up, eyes wide and wet. "You shouldn't," he said. "I don't deserve it." "No," Evelyn agreed gently. "You don't." She let that truth settle before continuing. "But forgiveness isn't something we give because it's earned," she said. "It's something we give so that the harm doesn't keep living inside us." Logan's shoulders shook as a sob tore free. He bowed his head, covering his face with his hands, the sound of his crying raw and unrestrained. "I'll make this right," he said between breaths. "I'll pull the footage. I'll report myself. I'll accept whatever happens. I promise." Evelyn nodded. "What you do next matters more than what you did before." The man in white watched the exchange quietly, a faint smile touching his lips, not of approval, but of hope. This was the miracle most people missed. Not the healing of flesh, not the vanishing of wounds, but the moment a hardened heart broke open and chose a different path forward. And once that choice was made, nothing, not even the past, could ever be quite the same again. Logan wiped his face with the back of his hand and stood slowly, as if afraid any sudden movement might shatter what had just happened. "I'll pull the footage now," he said, his voice steadier than before, though his eyes still burned red. "Right now." No one stopped him. He walked toward the small office above the floor, keys shaking slightly as he unlocked the door. The monitors flickered to life one by one, casting pale blue light across the walls. With a few clicks, the video appeared. Aisle 12. Evelyn, clearly visible, picking up items, reading labels, putting them back carefully, placing one box into her cart. No hiding, no concealment, no theft. The truth played out in high definition, undeniable and complete. Logan turned the monitor so others could see. Several people leaned forward instinctively, as if needing to witness the proof with their own eyes. A murmur rippled through the store, part disbelief, part shame. Officer Crow watched from the floor, his expression hollow. He didn't argue. He didn't look away. He absorbed every frame like a sentence being read aloud in a courtroom. Logan swallowed hard. "I lied," he said openly now. "About the cameras. About everything. I'll report this to corporate and to internal investigations. I know what that means." Everyone did. Termination, charges, consequences that could not be undone with apologies. Crow pushed himself slowly to his feet. His movements were heavy, deliberate. "I'll cooperate," he said quietly. "With internal affairs, with prosecutors, with anyone they send." He paused, then added, "I deserve whatever comes." No one celebrated. This wasn't victory. It was reckoning. The man in white stepped forward, his presence calm amid the tension. He looked at Crow, not with condemnation, but with clarity. "Justice is not cruelty," he said, "and mercy is not denial." Crow nodded once, accepting the truth of it. "Facing what you've done is the first step," the man continued. "Not escaping consequences, but meeting them honestly." Crow closed his eyes, breathing deeply. When he opened them again, something had changed. Not peace, not yet, but resolve. Evelyn watched quietly, her hands folded in front of her. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction at seeing others brought low, only a strange, solemn gratitude. Because justice, she understood now, wasn't about watching someone fall. It was about making sure the truth could finally stand, unbent, unhidden, and free. And that, she knew, always came at a price. By the time Evelyn stepped out of the store, the sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long bands of gold across the parking lot. The world looked unchanged, cars idling, carts rattling, a warm breeze carrying the smell of asphalt and dust. But she felt different moving through it, lighter, as if something she had carried for years had finally been set down. She checked her phone. 3 missed calls. All from Madison. Her heart tightened. She called back immediately, fingers steady now. "Mom," Madison answered, relief flooding her voice. "Where are you? Lily's been waiting. She keeps saying you'll come." "I'm on my way," Evelyn said gently. "Tell her I'm coming." She hung up and began walking toward the bus stop, grocery bags balanced carefully in her hands. With each step, she tested her body again, half expecting the pain to return. It didn't. The ride felt endless. Every red light stretched. Every stop seemed to linger. Evelyn stared out the window, replaying Lily's face in her mind, the way her eyes lit up when she saw her grandmother, the way her trust rested so easily in small promises kept. When the bus finally pulled to the curb near the school, Evelyn stepped down and hurried as much as she could. Inside the building, the hallway lights were dimmer now. Most classrooms were empty. Voices echoed faintly from one room at the end of the hall. Evelyn's breath caught as she rounded the corner. Lily sat at a small desk, swinging her legs gently, a picture book open in front of her. A teacher sat nearby, reading softly, pausing now and then to glance at the clock. Then Lily looked up. Her face transformed instantly. "Grandma!" she cried, leaping from her chair. She ran across the room and threw her arms around Evelyn's waist, squeezing tight. Evelyn dropped her bags and knelt, holding her granddaughter as if letting go might undo everything. "I knew you'd come," Lily said into her shoulder. "I wasn't worried." Evelyn closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "I'm sorry I was late," she whispered. "Something unexpected happened." Lily pulled back just enough to look at her. "Are you okay?" Evelyn smiled, a real smile, unforced and warm. "I am now." The teacher approached quietly, offering a kind nod. "She was very patient," she said. "She believed you'd be here." Evelyn took Lily's hand as they walked toward the door. Outside, the sky had deepened into soft shades of pink and blue. Lily chattered happily about butterflies and birthdays and cake. Evelyn listened, her heart full, because in that moment, she understood something with absolute clarity. Even in the longest waits, someone was always watching over them. And love, when it was real, never doubted it would arrive. That evening, Evelyn stood in her small kitchen as the sun slipped behind the rooftops, painting the walls in soft amber light. The groceries sat neatly arranged on the counter. Butter, pasta, strawberries. Everything she had planned for Lily's birthday dinner, still intact, still waiting, just as she was. Evelyn moved slowly at first, half expecting her body to protest. It didn't. Her hands were steady as she washed the fruit. Her shoulders felt loose, unburdened. When she bent to reach a pan from the lower cabinet, there was no sharp reminder of age or strain, only quiet strength. Lily sat at the table, swinging her legs and humming softly to herself as she colored balloons on a sheet of paper. "You're smiling," Lily observed suddenly, looking up. Evelyn paused, surprised. Then she laughed softly. "Am I?" "Yes," Lily said. "Certain. You look lighter." Evelyn crossed the room and brushed a curl from Lily's forehead. "I feel lighter." They worked together, the way they always did. Lily stirred when told. Evelyn guided gently, patient as ever. The kitchen filled with familiar smells, warm butter, sugar, something sweet beginning to take shape. Later, as the cake cooled on the counter, Evelyn stepped into the quiet of her bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed and rested her hands in her lap. For a moment, the memory of the store tried to return. The floor, the cuffs, the fear. But it no longer owned her. She closed her eyes and breathed. In the silence, she felt it again, not as a presence she could see, but as something woven into everything around her. In the hum of the refrigerator, in Lily's laughter drifting down the hall, in the simple fact that she was standing here, whole. "I wasn't alone," Evelyn whispered. The words felt true in a way that went beyond belief. The next morning would come. Life would continue. There would still be bills, aches, uncertainties. Not everything had been erased, but something essential had changed. Evelyn Carter, widow, worker, grandmother, had been seen, not as a suspect, not as a problem, but as a person whose life mattered. She stepped back into the kitchen where Lily waited, eyes bright with anticipation for tomorrow's celebration. "Grandma," Lily said, grinning, "do you think angels ever come to grocery stores?" Evelyn smiled, a knowing warmth spreading through her chest. "I, I think," she said gently, "they go wherever they're needed most." And as she turned off the lights that night, the darkness felt different, not empty, not frightening, but full of quiet promise, because Evelyn now knew, without doubt, that she had never been invisible, and she never would be again. Before you leave, take a moment to sit with this story, because somewhere in it, most of us recognize ourselves. Maybe you were Evelyn, judged unfairly, unheard, made to feel invisible when you had done nothing wrong. Maybe you were Lily, waiting, trusting, believing that love would show up. Or maybe, if we're honest, you were in the crowd, watching, feeling that something was wrong, but staying silent because speaking up felt risky, uncomfortable, inconvenient. These moments don't only happen in stories. They happen in grocery stores, in workplaces, in schools, in everyday life, right in front of us. And the truth is simple, even when it's hard to accept. Injustice doesn't survive on cruelty alone. It survives on silence. So here's the question we leave you with tonight. If you had been there, would you have spoken up? If this story moved you, share it with someone who might need to hear it right now. And if you believe that stories of faith, courage, redemption, and quiet miracles still matter in this world, we invite you to become part of our community. Subscribe to Heaven Walks With Us, because light still walks among us, sometimes quietly, sometimes unexpectedly, but always exactly when it's needed most. Thank you for walking with us.